Today in episode 45 of the podcast, we will be discussing the new Star Wars trilogy that was announced, and is Channing Tatum's Gambit going to get the Deadpool treatment? We'll also be reviewing the horror film Heretic and reviewing the first season of Tomb Raider: The Legend of Lara Croft. I'm Brad, he's Josh, and this is We'll Bring the Popcorn.
So our first news story of the week, unfortunately, we have a couple of legends of the business that have passed away this week, starting, of course, with Tony Todd, the legendary horror icon who died at the age of 69. He was most famous for Candyman, the Candyman franchise, one of the more underappreciated, I think, horror movie franchises of all time. But the man had well over 200 acting credits in his career, and just what an absolute legend that has gone far too soon.
Yeah, I was glad to see them bring him back for the more modern remake of Candyman. And he also, if you're a video game player, he voiced Venom in Insomniac Games Spider-Man 2, which he did a fantastic job at that. But yeah, it feels like you've seen his face in like everything. You may not always know his name, but if you saw his face or heard his voice, you know who he was. But yeah, our hearts and thoughts go out to his family. But we also lost the legendary record producer Quincy Jones this week at 91 years old. Of course, his daughter Rashida Jones, who's been in The Office and Parks and Recreation and a billion other things. But I mean, he's responsible for so many artists just becoming huge, and he started in jazz and everything back in the day, and modern, I'd say 80s, 90s, 2000s. There were so many artists that owe their career to him.
Absolutely iconic producer, had his hands in so many different projects, from artists ranging from Michael Jackson all the way to fairly more recent artists as well. Just an absolute legend in the business. That word gets thrown around a lot, but he is a true musical powerhouse and a heavyweight in that industry, and it's a big loss for the industry for sure. And just so many things can be tied to him musically that his imprint on the business will be forever felt. So once again, our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of those that we lost this week, unfortunately.
And so moving on to talk about Ryan Reynolds some, because there's a few news stories that came out this week about him, with the first one being he's confirmed that Hugh Jackman and Shawn Levy and him are going to team up for another movie, and he's spending the next year writing the script for that film, so we don't really know exactly what it's going to be, but it's going to bring the three of them together. Of course, Deadpool and Wolverine did so well. They've worked together. Ryan Reynolds and Shawn Levy has worked together before on a few things, so we don't know if maybe could this be a sequel to one of the projects they already did that's going to bring Hugh Jackman in, or is it going to be something new? But he also confirmed, because there's a lot of rumors and talks that maybe Ryan and Hugh Jackman would be hosting the Oscars this year. Yeah. And he kind of shot that down because he said he didn't want to be in the middle of the creative process of writing and having all that on his mind and being on stage trying to be funny and do all that stuff. So he kind of shot down that there really isn't a chance for them to do the Oscars because he's working on this script.
Yeah, and obviously they had such incredible magic in Deadpool and Wolverine that it makes sense that all these guys want to work together again. Notoriously, Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman have one of my favorite frenemy type back and forths on social media over the years. You could just tell they have such a great time working together. And, Shawn Levy's been open in his praise of working with both of them, that it makes sense that they're going to, work on this new project together. There's been rumblings that, Deadpool and Wolverine are both coming back in the MCU together at some point, and who knows if Shawn Levy will be attached to that as well. But you got to figure there's going to be another Deadpool and Wolverine movie with as successful as that one was. You got to go back to that well again. And I think that time will come down the line. But yeah, it's cool to see them, deciding to work together on this new project. Like you said, there's not a whole lot of information we have yet because they haven't even written the movie yet. But the fact that they're committing themselves to, taking the time to work on something, that's going to do really well once that sees the light of day for sure.
And I did forget to mention this, it won't be MCU related. It's not Marvel related. It's a completely original outside of anything that they've done together, at least in Marvel. They shot down Marvel, but as I mentioned, it could be a sequel to something done, but I have a feeling if he's spending a year writing the script and developing and working on it, it's going to be some sort of brand new property for them to sink their teeth in that they can really have a lot of fun with without having anything holding them down from doing anything that they want to do with it. I would assume it's going to have plenty of humor in it, though.
It has to, because the comedic timing that those two have together was just absolutely fantastic in Deadpool and Wolverine. and we're excited to see where, you know, that goes with them working together again. Now, he also came out this week and mentioned that, you know, Marvel has been absolutely obsessed with the reception that Channing Tatum and Gambit got in Deadpool and Wolverine. If you haven't seen it yet, you're probably one of 5 people on the planet that haven't seen it at this point, but you know, Gambit was just so fun, so memeable, so many quotable lines that he had coming out of that, you know, they'd be crazy not to take a further look at him. And, you know, Marvel's basically come out and said that they've, you know, needed to see it in action to see how well it would work because, you know, for the longest time, Gambit was, you know, a character that Channing Tatum never thought he would get to play on screen. Like, he'd been attached to that project for so long to see that not only was it was done so well and was so, you know, helpful in making that movie as successful as it was, and just have people continue to talk about it. Like, there's a very real possibility that Gambit could get his own series or movie spinoff because of this.
Yeah, Ryan said it felt a lot like kind of how things fell and did with Deadpool. Of course, they had such a hard time getting Deadpool going, and they, you know, somebody leaked the test footage and it blew up and everyone after it. So he said it's kind of a similar situation. Marvel needed to see him as Gambit and see in action, and it worked so well that they're now like obsessed with it, that they want to potentially do more stuff with it. So we don't know if this means maybe he, you know, Channing could get a movie or a TV series, or maybe he just shows back up in Secret Wars or something else, because there is a deleted scene to Deadpool and Wolverine that shows Gambit does kind of escape that void and goes back to his Earth and everything. So he's alive and he's potentially there to be able to be used. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I was one of those, I was a little hesitant on Channing Tatum being Gambit because, you know, he's a decent actor and he's really proved it in the last few years in the roles he's taken on and everything. But you just didn't know. I mean, if he really fit Gambit and everything, but even though he was hamming it up and went way over the top because that's what they wanted, was for him to go way over the top, it worked so well. Like, I think he could actually do a pretty good Gambit, because other than him, we had Taylor Kitsch, who in X-Men Origins Wolverine did a Gambit, but he was kind of barely Gambit. He just looks like Taylor Kitsch in a trench coat, and that was about it. And you got to see some cards, and that's about all you got to see of the character. Like, it really wasn't a version of Gambit that we have had, and this was comic accurate Gambit got shown on screen. And I think he really excelled in it when we kind of left from that layer and went into the battle action. He looked fantastic in action as Gambit.
He looked believable in that too, and I think we're also extra like guarding of that character because of our personal attachment to it being both of our favorite X-Men characters. And it was so great to see how they pulled that off. You know, like, of all the things you hear quoted from that movie right now, like, the things that people take away were that incredible opening sequence set to, you know, bye with the, you know, the fight scene with the TVA, but also like the lines that were quoted from Gambit. Gambit was like a big, you know, like, takeaway from that film for everybody, with, you know, the over-the-top accent.
I'm about to make him a name.
Yeah, like, I hear that all the time still. Like, it's a big takeaway from that film, and, you know, they'd be crazy not to go back to that well. I think they could pull it off and make it work. I'd love to see him get a series, maybe not necessarily a whole movie, because movie-wise, there's so much that they have to do that the possibility of them making it, unless they want to put him in X-Men when they get there, like, have him be a part of that X-Men cast, which I think could work, but I think he would do well in his own, like, TV series, kind of like an Echo or kind of like that, where you give him, you know, 7 or 8 episodes to do like a full season and a full story of that it could work. Like, I think that would work really well for him.
Give me a Daredevil level Gambit series. Give me, because one thing I've been dying for, and we've mentioned a few times in here, I wanted to see a proper live action Gambit and a proper live action Rogue. Like, I like Anna Paquin as an actress, but they didn't do anything that wasn't Rogue. That was a damsel in distress that you could have called any name, done anything with. She wasn't Rogue in those Fox X-Men movies. So yeah, give me like comic accurate, but just give me a solid Rogue and Gambit together in a series or in Secret Wars or something else. I want to see them interacting. I just want to see a proper version of them done. And I think Channing Tatum could be the proper version of Gambit for that.
I think so too. And the jury's still out, and we'll see if they move forward with it. as we'll talk to it a little bit later, they've got so much stuff coming up on the pipeline that you got to find a place to fit it in. And I think that's the best avenue for it, because movie slate's looking like it's going to be full. They do seem to be amping up the TV aspect of their production too. So we'll see where that slides in and if they decide to move forward with it.
Yeah, because Marvel's talked maybe 2 films a year and 3 series a year going forward, which includes animated and live action. So next year is an exception because they already had so much stuff already sitting and waiting because of COVID with Ironheart and a few others. Like, they've got to get all this stuff out so they can move forward, especially with Doomsday coming, Secret Wars coming. They've got to kind of catch everything back up that COVID slowed down.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a full slate next year, which is awesome for us as, people that like to consume that content and talk about it in, the form that we do. But it'll be fun to see how they structure that beyond that once they get past it. So it's something to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, heading over to Amazon, they have another property that they're taking on. So, of course, we've got Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. They've done Reacher. They've done quite a lot of kind of adaptations and bringing other things on. Now they're taking on Mass Effect. So Mass Effect is a video game series, a sci-fi epic video game series. I mean, the first and second ones are talked about highly. The third one and Andromeda and kind of going on. They're working on the next one, which hopefully kind of goes back to its roots and stuff. But I'm excited for this because I was a huge fan of the series. Like, the third one was a little bit of a letdown. Andromeda was a little bit okay. It wasn't a terrible game, but it was okay. BioWare, they did Mass Effect and they did the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and they have some epic games behind them. And this was one of them that really looked like it could become a good series or film. It can be Star Wars meets Game of Thrones, because there is a lot of, the game series is about making choices, and some of your choices can lead to characters dying that you don't get to see again. So they could really make an epic Game of Thrones meets Star Wars kind of epic series if they do it right. That's the only thing, is if they can do it right, because video game adaptations haven't always been great, and we've been lucky in the last few years and most of them have turned out really good. We're going to talk about another video game adaptation in Tomb Raider coming up here later, but hopefully this is one that they can nail.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the what if thing, right? And you spoke to a lot of those. For every one that they do solid, there's always like a Halo series that they that they missed the boat on, that a lot of people think you could take and really adapt and make a really good, story out of, and it's so hit and miss. Amazon, for the most part, to their benefit, have made a lot of really high quality, high value, series that I'm more confident in them taking on, as opposed to one of these other companies that kind of fumble it a little bit. I know Paramount really fumbled. I hate to say it, but like Halo in particular, because that was one that was highly sought after and highly, anticipated, and they fumbled the bag on it. You know what I mean? And it became a hot mess and a bit of a meme of itself. But, there is a lot of good lore that you could pull from those games, because the games are beautiful and brilliant and well done and super popular. So the audience is kind of already pre-built in to give it a chance to do well. And if, like you said, if they hit it out of the park, they have a real chance for a solid home run that they could, they could take advantage of for several years, that they could, turn this into a long form series that I think could do really well if they do it right, which is always the key in this situation.
Yeah, it could potentially be very big. Like I said, it can be Star Wars level epic. It can be Game of Thrones level epic. Like, it could be, it's going to be a costly series, but with Lord of the Rings, they've shown, like, all right, if it's at least performing, they're going to keep pumping the money into it. But I'm also curious to see what kind of direction they go, because you could choose between a male and female character. The default one is the male, but Jennifer Hale's Femme Shepherd was probably the most popular version of that character. So do we end up leading with a female character instead of a male, or do we get kind of a hybrid that we've kind of got that the male shepherd becomes something else in there, and then we have the lead as the female shepherd? Sure. And it's going to have a lot of prosthetics and a lot of computer graphics and stuff. It's going to be expensive. It's going to take a while. So we don't have an idea yet when they're going to start production on that. But with just knowing the game series, it's going to take a few years before we finally see the series.
Yeah, but if they take their time with it and do it right, it's going to be worth the wait. How often do we see shows that kind of take their time to get them out, and they're incredible when they're done? So, our need to have things right away. I know we like to joke and say, I need to see it now, but if they take their time with it and do it right, it's going to be worth the wait if they do it. But if they try to rush it out, you kind of run your risk of it not being as high quality or as good as you want it or need it to be successful. And that's kind of that line they got to walk. So I'm hoping they take their time with it and really nail it and get it down right. And we have something that's going to be, wonderful to anticipate for several years down the line.
You have to see what the episode count is for, because, with streaming, a lot of episode counts have been kind of cut down between 8 to 13 episodes. And I think Mass Effect, even if you're taking one game at a time, there's enough story and lore and action and everything else that 8 episodes might not be enough to tell the story properly. So hopefully they don't go in with a very strict episode count and allow the story to breathe and do it right that way.
Yeah, and that's why it's such a fine line to walk, it's at the end, it's the cost of doing the show in a more constricted manner than just the free form to, do 20 episodes at that point. It's a hard line to walk, but it's one that they definitely have to make a choice on one way or another, for sure. So we mentioned it in the intro, but I want to talk about, a new report from Deadline suggests that there could be a new potential trilogy in the works from Star Wars. Now, Star Wars has been, at least movie-wise, kind of on the shelf since, the Skywalker saga wrapped up. They've been focused more on the TV side of things. But now there's talk that it could be either episodes 10, 11, and 12 and a continuation of that, or it could be a brand new trilogy that's in the works.
Yeah, we got Simon Kinberg, who wrote and directed X-Men Dark Phoenix. He also wrote and directed the 355, but he's also known in the Star Wars realm as being a co-creator of Star Wars Rebels. So no matter how you felt about the 355 and how Dark Phoenix turned out, he helped create one of the biggest animated series that they've had. Like, Rebels was one of the most popular ones that they put out. So it is interesting to see that they're having him write and develop all 3, because that was kind of the problem with 7, 8, and 9 that a lot of people had, is that the story just felt not connected. It felt like they were kind of making it up as each one did. Like, the 7 happened, and then 8 just kind of threw a lot of the stuff out of the window, and then went 9 that tried to retcon and go back and do what 7 did and ignore a little bit of 8. Like, it just didn't have a fully solid connected story. So having him handle all 3 is going to be really interesting, and hopefully that gets us a really nice, solid story. But yeah, we don't know if it's going to be continuing on the Skywalker saga with 3 new ones with 10, 11, and 12, or if we're going to a different time period. We tried with the Acolyte, we went back into the past. Maybe we go a few years in the future and we get to see something that's still Skywalker-esque, but it's advanced down the line, because we don't really know exactly what they plan to do. We have the Rey movie that's taking a few years afterwards. So if it is a continuation, it's going to happen sometime after those movies and everything happens. But we just don't know exactly the direction that's going in. But hey, we've got 3 more Star Wars movies coming. We've got Mandalorian Grogu, we got the Rey movie. Now we'll see exactly where these fit in the timeline.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways they can go. There's so many avenues of that world that you can explore. I know there's a very large portion of the Star Wars fan base that's kind of over the whole Skywalker story, and they kind of want something fresh and new, or at least they think they do, because we notoriously like to say nobody hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. So it's one of those things we'll see. I do like the fact that they're at least presenting it as a kind of unified creative front, as far as you're going to get the consistent input throughout the 3 movies if they do that trilogy. Like you said, it's not that disjointed, too many chefs in the kitchen kind of thing that we had to deal with for episodes 7, 8, and 9, which were admittedly a jumbled mess. Some very good, some really bad, and some laughably bad. So there's that mixed bag. That what happens when you get like that disconnected creative vision that you don't get to see all the way through or have one person handle. So if they can let him kind of take this ball and run with it for 3 movies, I think you've got the potential to tell a really well done set of films that can hopefully restore some of that love for Star Wars back to it. Now, like you said, you hear the word associated with X-Men the Dark Phoenix, and everybody kind of grits their teeth, because that is notoriously not a very good movie at all. But you counteract with the fact that at least in this universe he is attached to Rebels, which for my money is one of the best things Star Wars has ever done. I love the Rebels series. You see a lot of what played out in that in a lot of the current TV landscape of Star Wars, where you have the Ahsoka series that dealt with a lot of the characters in Star Wars Rebels that you get to see. So there's the potential for that to be really well done, and I'm excited to see where they can take this story and what they decide to do with it. And hopefully we can get some positivity and excitement back to Star Wars that's been missing for a while outside of the Mandalorian universe.
And do we finally get our Darth Jar Jar trilogy?
I would love it.
We see Jar Jar as a Sith Lord, and as we got with the animated Lego series coming up, we get to see a Darth Jar Jar, but maybe they'll see if any of those alternate storylines work well from that animated. Maybe they bring us a live action Darth Jar Jar or something. I personally would love to see. I'd love to see Star Wars go a little bit more in the future away from the Skywalker saga. Like, you can still have it interconnected and have some Easter eggs and things lying around. But I've been a huge fan, and a lot of people have, when they've taken the Japanese samurai take on the Stormtrooper armor, on Darth Vader. We had that in Star Wars Visions. We got to see some of the samurai lightsabers and all that. I would love to see, because we know Star Wars is based on his love for that. Like, it was samurai in space. Like, he led that to bring Star Wars alive. I'd love to see them to go harder in that. Give us stormtrooper armor that looks very Japanese and samurai. Give us an bad guy that looks like he's wearing this big samurai armor. Give us lightsabers that look more like katanas and other Japanese blades and stuff. I'd love to see him kind of go in that direction and give us a more kind of a dramatic. They've always tried to stay in the family friendly realm, and they don't have to go over the top crazy with it, but I would love to see a really dramatic samurai Star Wars trilogy.
Give me a Shogun-esque Star Wars story and I would be hooked right away. We've been nothing short of praiseful for Shogun and our love for it. But if you could tell that type of story in the Star Wars universe, there's potential for a lot of magic there. So I would love to see that happen.
Moving on to one of the big breakout hits of this season was the Fallout series. As we talked about video game adaptations with Amazon, Fallout turned out to be really good. Like, you can go back and see what we thought of the first season in our archives here, but it was done really good. And for the 90 kids and the Home Alone fans, we've got some casting news for season 2. So Macaulay Culkin is one of the first actors to join the cast. He's going to be playing a crazy genius type character, which should fit really well with his personality, especially as he's gotten older and stuff. But he's joining the cast of Fallout Season 2.
That's exciting. That's going to be a lot of fun. You get to see Macaulay Culkin, as an adult now. Everybody remembers him as Kevin McAllister in the Home Alone movies, but like he's actually a pretty solid actor as an adult now too, and he's going to get to show off some of his chops in this and be that wacky, crazy, over-the-top character that you want in the Fallout series. So I'm excited to see where all that goes. We see where they left off and where they were moving forward. If you haven't watched it, go back and watch it, because it's definitely worth a watch. But you kind of see where they're moving forward with the series, moving into a season 2. Now the season 2 is getting ready to start filming next year, with late next year, or next year, with the hope of coming out maybe by the end of the year or possibly 2026. That's definitely something we're going to be looking forward to watching and covering as well, that I'm excited to see where they go with it. And that's a fun name to add to the cast for sure.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a blast, because it is kind of silly, over the top, which is exactly how the game series is. So he can definitely ham it up on screen and have a lot of fun with it. I'm curious if it's going to be a brand new character to the universe, or if he's going to be bringing another character from within the Fallout universe game, because we kind of got hints of New Vegas, and we got hints from various entries into the series. He could be playing a character from kind of really any of those. I mean, it kind of is leaning a little bit more towards New Vegas, so maybe there's a character from there that he could bring in and do a little craziness, but I think they're going to have a lot of fun. It is a recurring character. Doesn't look like it's going to be a cameo or one small thing, so he'll at least have a little bit of a role in this season, and I'm looking forward to it. Like, I think the first one took a couple years before it came out, so yeah, if I was betting, I would say it'd be 2026 to probably late 2026 before we're able to see it, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's going to be one that we're definitely keeping an eye on. I'll be excited to watch, cover, talk about for sure. And adding somebody like Macaulay Culkin is awesome. I love to see that he's, kind of making a little bit of a comeback again. And I think that's going to do wonders for him in his attempts to kind of continue his acting career well into his adulthood, where a lot of people didn't think he would get a chance to. And it's exciting to see what he could do in that type of role.
Are we going to get him or someone else doing the scream at him or something, like get the power armor going and he holds his face or something. You know they're going to make fun of it in some way. No matter when they bring these type of actors and characters in, there's always going to be some sort of reference to something that they've done before, especially if the show is kind of as silly over the top as Fallout is. I mean, it's got some seriousness to it and but it has a lot of fun to it. So I have a feeling there's going to be some sort of joke. And I know he's done a whole lot more than Home Alone. He's, of course, did a dramatic role with My Girl as a kid as well. So we'll see what kind of reference. Maybe there'll be a bee reference in there to him or something. He'll die by getting stung by bees and fall out or something like that. Just you think we're going to talk about Home Alone? Nope, we're going straight My Girl.
It's so funny. There's so many opportunities for that, and he's always been a good sport about that type of thing. So excited to see how they incorporate him into the show for sure. Now I want to move over into Disney a little bit. We have Moana 2 coming up, which is a very highly anticipated film. It was actually just released this week that Moana itself is the most watched animated movie streaming wise of all time, which not a big surprise. I know it's been a huge hit ever since Disney Plus has been a thing, but it's broken all kinds of streaming records. And the second one is kind of with the anticipation of it building off of that, like it's on pace to track to be on par with Inside Out 2 as one of the highest grossing animated films ever.
That's kind of crazy, especially, Disney is the king of animation, especially taking over Pixar. So you could potentially have Pixar and Disney breaking their own record, which was another Disney movie. Of course, that's skeptical because they're considering the live action CG Lion King as being now the second highest grossing animated film of all time. But yeah, that's kind of big that Moana 2 is tracking to potentially, Inside Out 2 did better than anybody really expected this summer. If they're already looking at Moana 2 to break that in the same year, that's gonna, you put Deadpool and Wolverine in there as well, and Marvel and Disney, Disney's had an incredible year if that does end up happening. But yeah, Moana on Disney Plus, they said it's been watched over 748 million times on Disney Plus in the last 5 years. And that's just, my girls love it. We've watched it a ton, but that's just insane that it's done that. And I'm really curious to see how Moana 2 does, because it was one of those that kind of came out of the blue. They originally developing it as a series, but they decided to scrap it as a series and turn it into a movie. So, you had Dwayne Johnson and all of them weren't a part of it until it became a movie again. And then they brought them in kind of after they had already cut it together, they brought them in just to reprise their roles. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that turns out. But they're also doing the live action Moana. I think Dwayne Johnson showed that he's been filming some stuff for it already. So if you've got Moana 2 potentially breaking that record, I wonder how the live action is going to do if Moana 2 does have that type of reception.
Yeah, it's going to be hit or miss when it gets to the live action portion of it, but when it comes to animation, it's going to do really well. The families are going to be out in full force to see it. I'm excited for it. The trailers have been very minimal for a reason, I think, and you can already kind of tell the music in it looks like it's going to be just as epic as, if not more epic than the original, which is very hard to do because there's so many really good songs that kind of come out of that original. And it was kind of a surprising big hit for them. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, if you could go back to, how we watched those movies like a generation ago or 2 generations ago, or, Disney's been around for so long, but in the time, especially with like VHSs and things like that, when we were watching animated features, like how, if we could have quantified that, just how comparable those movies then would have been with the level of access that you have to everything now. Cause we're going to age ourselves a little bit here where, the running thing back in the day was, buy this VHS of this movie before it goes into the Disney vault, never to be seen again kind of thing, where they only kept those movies out and around for a limited time, to where if you didn't buy it, you kind of missed out, to kind of force people's hands into buying it. But it'd been really neat to see if we could have quantified that based on how we watched those back in the day, because there's some movies that I know that we watched over and over again when we were kids, that habit really hasn't changed, but they just have a better way of tracking it now, obviously. But the success of Moana itself is just incredible to see, and I know this is very highly anticipated, probably on par with Frozen 2 when it came out, kind of level of hype around it, that I think it's going to do really well. And like you said, it's already on track to potentially break Inside Out 2's record already, which is crazy because that's 2 really, really huge hits in the span of a year for Disney, who a lot of people were wondering how they could bounce back, but this year they're the undisputed king of the box office again, and they're going to end the year really strongly with this one.
Yeah, my kids will never know the dread of putting in your favorite movie from a VHS tape and realizing that, oh, I have to rewind it to the beginning to be able to watch it, and you're just sitting there listening to it go through and like waiting several minutes, and then, all right, well, now I've got to rewound, and now I need to fast forward through everything because there's not a skip button, and all right, I got to the beginning of the movie, I'm ready to watch it now finally. Like, you had to wait to watch stuff back in our day. Now my kids can jump between so many streaming platforms and a click of a button to go back to the beginning if they want to rewatch it, and it's just like, yeah, that's so different how we did the Disney classics back in our day to how they ingest them now, because it's just so different. But yeah, I would love to see if they could have had stats on the replays on VHS and the DVDs when they first came out, just to see how many times, because you'd say some of the classics have been watched billions upon billions of times now through VHS and DVD.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm getting really tired of feeling old when we talk about these things. I think my back just locked up talking about that right now. But yeah, it's exciting to see this movie. I know we're excited to go see it here soon. And spoiler alert ahead of time, we're going to be reviewing it on the podcast as well. I'm very excited to check it out and see what they do for the sequel to top what was already an incredible film and see how they continue that story for sure.
Yeah, we know nothing about it yet, but one film I'm really looking forward to next year is Christopher Nolan's next film. Well, it's going to be filming next year, be out in 2026, where they just added a bunch more cast members, so he can pretty much get anybody he wants, but he's got some familiar faces that he's worked with before coming back. So you've got Anne Hathaway and Zendaya have joined Tom Holland and Matt Damon in it, and I also saw Lupita Nyong'o has joined the cast as well, so the cast is already getting pretty stacked. But it's really interesting that Zendaya has joined it because, you know, Tom and Zendaya are dating, and they've been dating for years, and they do the Spider-Man films together. They haven't worked outside of the Spider-Man films. And next year, they'll be filming Spider-Man 4 together. So there's potential that they're going to be doing Spider-Man 4 and Christopher Nolan's film back-to-back. So most of the year they could be filming together, which maybe it's something they wanted to do. And, you know, with relationships and everything else in Hollywood, it can be tough to find time for each other. And what better way to find time for each other when you're doing the same exact movies back to back? Yeah,
it's a good chance to spend time together, right? But I'm excited for whatever direction this Christopher Nolan film is going to be. We still don't know literally anything about what the type of film is going to be. He's been very tight-lipped on, you know, is it going to be an action film? Is it going to be some kind of epic? You know, when it's Christopher Nolan attached to it, it's going to be very cinematic, very, you know, feeling like a big deal, big time, you know, important type movie. But yeah, he's able to get just about literally whoever he wants to be in these movies, and that's an already stacked list of people that, you know, is going to help make that movie very successful on top of having his name attached to it to begin with. But yeah, it's exciting to see that Zendaya and Tom Holland working together again, going to be filming a good chunk of the year next year together, and then obviously all the press and stuff they're going to get to do with it. So it's either going to work really well for them or it may not. You never know, just to see how those experiences go. But yeah, I'm excited to see them, you know, working together on this and something outside of Marvel, just to see what kind of chemistry they could have on camera, you know, outside of that setting.
And you got Chris bringing Marvel and DC together because Anne Hathaway was in the Dark Knight series. And, of course, you've got Zendaya and Tom in the MCU and Spider-Man and stuff. But, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how that film turns out. I mean, I personally haven't seen a bad film by him. Like, there's some that haven't been as great as his others, but he hasn't put out a bad film. He is one of our biggest visionary directors that we've had when you talk about Spielberg and Francis Ford Coppola, and you talk about just everybody of the 70s and 80s who brought film into a new generation. I think that's what Christopher Nolan is doing as well. So I'm really looking forward to see that film. Like, we'll see if it ends up being that period horror that's been rumored, or if it ends up being this helicopter cop kind of movie, which does seem a little bit, maybe there's a bigger twist in that, because he's always got something that's a little bit more interesting than something that's kind of just straightforward. Oh, it's helicopter cops or something. There's got to be some sort of twist. Maybe they travel through time or something else. Like, you don't really know, but I'm looking forward to it. I mean, yeah, he's getting a stacked cast already. I mean, I don't know who would really want to say no to Christopher Nolan, especially with how his films have done. And it does look like we could have another Barbenheimer going on with this, because Spider-Man 4 and his next film will release a week apart from each other. So there's going to be some sort of pushing, and you can have crossovers and stuff with actors, but When was the last time that we had two potentially blockbuster films having two main stars in each of them? Because they're top billing on Spider-Man 4, and they're going to be top billing on this. So, I mean, a week apart for two blockbusters with two of the same people, Tom Holland and Zendaya.
I'll be curious to see if those release dates hold that close together. I kind of got a feeling it's going to be spaced out a little more when it comes. Something's going to adjust. Marvel's notorious for switching some stuff around from time to time, but I could see that being moved a little bit to kind of, we'll see. The jury's still out on it, but I have a feeling that, those may not wind up back to back in the end, but we'll see. But those are definitely two films that we have to look forward to for sure. Now, speaking of things to look forward to, over the weekend now we've had D23 in Brazil, which, gave us just a plethora of information of things to come out, that there's a lot that we can kind of quick hit on before we go to the movie review. But, there were a lot of news tidbits dropped. We got new trailers for some of the upcoming Marvel properties. So if you go online, you can look for the trailers for the new Captain America trailer, the new Thunderbolts trailer, like there's things like that. We also got an update on Andor. It's going to be called Andor: A Star Wars Story. It's got season 2 coming in April of 2025, so it's exciting to finally get a date for that one.
Yeah, we got April 22nd, 2025, that we're finally going to see that. This is the final season. It will lead into Rogue One. We will have, I think they said every 3 episodes, we're going to have like a year time jump, so they're going to be kind of moving through it to get it up to Rogue One. So I'm really curious to see how they do. Like, the first season was fantastic, absolutely, but we'll see how they handle if the time jumps don't feel too jarring, and that you're able to tell a solid story when every few episodes you're jumping to a new part in the history of this character in this show, leading up to Rogue One, that we all know what happens in that film. So I'm really curious to see how they've handled season 2.
Yeah, for sure. And then we got an update on the X-Men. So the X-Men are going to be prominently featured following the events of Avengers Secret Wars, which is kind of the direction that we were hoping and kind of assuming that Marvel was going to take, as they slowly started to incorporate the X-Men more into it. And it looks like they are going to be prominently featured moving.
And I have a feeling that kind of semi-confirms that we're going to see them in Secret Wars. You've got to have, there's been rumors for a while that the Fox X-Men would show up again in Secret Wars. We've got Deadpool and Wolverine being rumored, but we've also got like the original X-Men cast from the Fox are rumored to appear in Secret Wars. So you would think there'd be some sort of setup and hint. Maybe it's a bonus scene, or with just how huge Secret Wars might be, that we're going to see maybe part of the new cast of the X-Men show up in Secret Wars. So we're kind of being led directly into the mutant saga right after Secret Wars ends, because that's what's next, is the mutant saga. We're going deeper into the mutants and, that side of the storyline. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they handle the X-Men and all the past characters and new characters that they have to set up, the new cast they have to set up after Secret Wars.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of stuff going on in the works in Marvel. I know that Kevin Feige mentioned the possibility we may not have seen the last of the Eternals. I know that's been kind of is a second movie coming? Are they going to be involved in anything else moving forward? They kind of can't really avoid that too much, so it's going to be interesting to see when, if, and how they get incorporated in other Marvel properties moving forward. He also mentioned that, they're about to wrap up filming on the Fantastic Four film, which is very highly anticipated, coming out in the middle of next year as well. So it's good to see that kind of coming to an end, wrapping up on filming. They can get that ready to come out next year, and that's another one that everybody's just chomping at the bit to see.
And they did show some footage there, but it wasn't released out to everybody. But apparently we saw Sue Storm. We saw her in her suit. We saw basically all of them in their suits and stuff. So I'm really looking forward to see what they are doing with that film, because as we've talked about and everyone knows, like, the Fantastic Four is the first family of Marvel, but when it comes to live action, they haven't done really well. Like, there's one from the 90s that they tried to hide and shelve and not let anybody see. And if you've ever seen any clips of it, it is terrible. And then, I enjoyed Jessica Alba and the Fox's version. They weren't great, but I had fun with them. But then they had the reboot, and it hasn't been done up to the standards that the fans wanted to see. So they know there's a lot riding on this version of Fantastic Four, not only for the MCU going forward, but for the characters themselves. They know that fans have a huge anticipation and want and desire for these characters, and there's a lot to live up to for that.
Yeah, for sure. It's an incredibly important part of, The Marvel lore, right? They are, like you said, the first family of Marvel. They're some of the most important characters ever, and they're so intertwined with literally everything Marvel that you kind of hope that they don't fumble the bag on this one. Obviously, there's been a little bit of a mixed reaction to Pedro Pascal being Mr. Fantastic himself, but at the end of the day, he's more than capable of pulling that role off. But it's going to be crazy to see like how that all comes together, and if they can kind of really capture that magic and make them important in the MCU moving forward. That's going to be really critical. Now, moving from the Fantastic Four, it was confirmed that Pedro Pascal is going to be playing Din Djarin, the Mandalorian, in the Mandalorian and Grogu. There was kind of some weird back and forth with that movie as to whether or not he was going to be involved because he's so involved with everything else. But if you're making The Mandalorian and Grogu, Pedro has to be involved. Now, I know they've kind of skirted away from that in the past season by not him just leaving his helmet on and just lending his voice to the character, which, spoiler alert, it's not Pedro Pascal in the suit. Like, as they're filming the show, it's him providing the voice and the vocal lines for this. But they did get the confirmation that he's coming back for that as well.
Yeah, because as you said, it's been a little controversial because it kind of seemed like there was rumors that he was ready to walk away after the last season. We didn't even really know this movie was coming. We thought we were waiting on another season that was going to wrap it up exactly not wrap it up, but maybe wrap up the series, because they did talk about they were going to wrap the whole thing up in a film with Ahsoka and, all that side of it. But it's good to see that he's going to come back, because we weren't sure exactly what time, because he had The Last of Us Part 2 that he was filming. He has Fantastic Four he's filming, and of course, and they have finished filming for The Mandalorian and Grogu, so that makes you wonder if he's done any face recordings or anything for it, if it will be fully just kind of voice acting that he's doing for the film. But it is good that they have him back. Like, you could get a sound alike or do something else, but you want that consistency. You don't want to be replacing an actor before it's over with here. So I'm glad he's still committed to it, and that they're still committed to have him being in that role, even if because we did leave that he's going to have his helmet on and probably leaving his helmet on. So it gives them outs, as you mentioned, because a lot of the times it was either a stunt guy or someone else who was, playing the body of him. And Pedro was at times in the suit and playing him, especially in the first season and everything. But yeah, it's good to see that he's coming back. And, speaking of coming back, X-Men 97, was a huge hit for him this summer. And they have announced with What If Season 3 that is coming in December, that Allison Seeley-Smith that we were able to talk to at Cincinnati Comic Expo, she was a sweetheart. It was amazing to be able to talk to her. And she has such an iconic voice as Storm. Yeah. She will be reprising Storm in What If Season 3, and she's going to wield Mjolnir.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's one that I've been waiting for to kind of come out with the next season of it. Now that little tidbit is dropped, so we know one of the episodes is going to involve Storm, wielding Thor's mighty hammer, which is already awesome. She's already an incredible character enough. Storm is like the most powerful mutant, like, period. But now she's going to wield the power of Thor as well, which may be overkill, but that's going to be exciting considering she can already control the weather. Here's a lightning hammer for you to...
How over the top is that going to be? Like, she can already control lightning. How is it going to look when she has Mjolnir doing? Like, are we just going to have a huge, gigantic, full sky filled with lightning crashing down?
I hope so. That's going to be a fun episode and a fun series that comes out in the end. And then our last little bit of information that we had coming out of it, there's been rumblings for a while now with the rising popularity of the Miles Morales character, especially in the Spider-Verse series. If we're ever going to get a live-action Miles Morales in the MCU, you got to figure at some point it's coming. Well, Kevin Feige did also mention that, we won't see any live-action Miles Morales until it's shortly after the release of the Beyond the Spider-Verse movie, but he worded it in a way that was a little ambiguous as to whether that character may actually show up in the third and final Spider-Verse film.
Yeah, his wording of that was really curious, because maybe he was trying to be a little coy about it, but he might have let a little too much slip, because, Miles has been the star of the Spider-Verse films, and it's been rumored for a while that the third one might feature some more live action. The second one had a little bit of live action that got mixed in, but the rumor is that, a live action Miles is going to show up, and he was like, yeah, we'll probably see Miles showing up in the MCU shortly after he appears in the third Spider-Verse film, which makes it feel like we're getting the live action Miles in the Spider-Verse film, and whoever is playing the live action version of him in that, if he does show up, might be the one that goes forward as Miles.
Are they going to give us the "it was all a dream" animation thing at the end where he wakes up and he's actually a real character and he's in the MCU already and they've got him tangentially connected to something? Like, that would be kind of a fun way to introduce him. But yeah, like, I'm more than beyond excited for this next Spider-Verse film. The first two are absolutely brilliant. I'm so looking forward to this third one when it finally comes out, and even more excited to get the character of Miles Morales introduced into the MCU. It kind of gives you a little bit of an out from having to rely so much on Tom Holland because, yeah, he's agreed to come back for more films, but he's not going to be doing the role forever as well. And I'd love to see Miles Morales, Peter Parker mashup anyway that you get if you play, the most recent Spider-Man games and see how those are all connected too. That I think you've got some potential magic for a Peter Parker, Miles Morales team up in a potential future Spider-Man movie or, something of that ilk that, this character who's grown tremendously in popularity now will finally get to jump into the MCU and get their time to shine as well. I know a lot of people are looking forward to that.
Imagine if in Secret Wars we have Tom, Toby, and Andrew, and then you throw in Miles Morales, and we have 4 different Spider-Men in Secret Wars battling in different ways. Because if you don't know that much about the Miles Morales character, he has the powers of Spider-Man, but he's different. He has, there's an electricity power that he's kind of got based on, how his powers came about. So he's similar, but he's got a lot of differences to him. So I'm really looking forward to seeing Miles Morales in live action, but just thinking of Secret Wars with potentially 4 different Spider-Men flying around and swinging around the screen could be really amazing.
Get the 4-way point, not the 3-way point.
Get a 4-way point.
Get a 4-way point with all of them together. That would be a lot of fun.
Imagine we get like an in-game type of scene where we've got Thomas Jane's Punisher and we have you get Dolph Lundgren come back. We get all the different Punishers and all the different X-Men, and they all just look at each other and they all point in a big field. Like there's hundreds of characters and they're all like, hey, huh?
It'd be a ton of fun. It's got that movie's got the potential to be so much fun if they can, depending on which way they want to go with it. But that's gonna be a big one for sure.
It popped in my head, but you just have Ben Affleck and you have the 2 Daredevils not pointing at each other because, of course, they're blind. Yeah. So they're just standing there like, wait, what's going on?
Yeah, what's happening? I don't know. Anyway, let's go.
That would be a lot of fun if they just went that everyone's pointing at them and they're just standing there in the middle like, what's going on? Okay,
you seem familiar. That would be a lot of fun for sure. I'm excited to see what the future of that character holds for sure.
So moving on to our film review of the week, we did go and see Heretic, which, we've seen this trailer before. I think every movie we've gone to for the last few months. Like it's been in heavy rotation, but I was pleasantly surprised by this film in the end. So it stars Hugh Grant as Mr. Reed. You have Sophie Thatcher as Sister Barnes, Chloe East as Sister Paxson. And it's got kind of a simplistic premise to it, is that you have these 2 sisters from the Church of Latter-day Saints, or, they have a list of houses they need to knock on to try to spread the word of their church and get some conversions and stuff. And, one of the names on the list was Mr. Reed. So they show up to his house, but not everything goes as they planned or thought it was going to happen.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting premise and setup for, what winds up being this horror thriller type film. So they do a really good job in this movie of setting the tension. Like they're really good at building tension in this movie where, it kind of starts off with the 2 sisters walking through the neighborhood and, there's a funny scene of them trying to walk up, a big set of stairs with their bikes, only to walk right back down a few moments later. Just like it was a funny optic for that. But this is mostly centered around the house of Mr. Reed, which they play into a lot of the things that the people that attend that church do with female missionaries going out and having to have another woman in the house present was a big thing at the beginning. They're like, hey, can we see your wife? And he kind of plays it up like, oh, my wife's just in the other room, that kind of thing. And it turns really dark really quick when you see that, Mr. Reed may not be as forthcoming with his intentions of welcoming them into his home to kind of learn about their religion. You can find out that the man is very well versed in theology and those things, and it kind of just it kind of goes on a really dark path for the rest of the film. Now we kind of have to go a little bit into spoilers for this just to kind of talk through some of the higher points of this movie to kind of give some context to why we think about it. So if you haven't seen the movie yet and you want to skip forward a little bit to where we go to our next review, if you're waiting to see the film, maybe do that and come back to this. But let's kind of deep dive into this because there's a lot of obviously religion and the things that either make religions very similar or separate from each other are kind of at the front and center and presented in ways that kind of get you thinking about life and religion and how it all ties together in a really fun and creative way, I think.
Yeah, and the way they did it could, which I enjoyed overall, how they did it could be a little controversial, especially to those that are heavily religious, because it does dive into the similarities to ancient myths and between the Quran and the Torah and the Book of Mormon and the Bible, and just how they all share similar stories and ideologies, but they all differ quite a lot, and man's part in it. So it does dive kind of deep into religion, but it does get into that creepy horror, and you got to see a little bit more of what Mr. Reed with Hugh Grant is doing. And he, you play off of Hugh Grant's normal charming, British demeanor and how he is and everything, but he does take a really creepy, dark turn in it. He was absolutely fantastic. I think this is one of his best performances that he's had. Like, he is able to kind of take you kind of just like he did with the women. It's raining heavily outside of his house and they're trying to pitch everything, and he's acting all surprised. No, I want to hear about it, because most of what they do is people have shown interest in the church, so they follow up with them. And so I guess that was his way to lure people here. But he was able to get them in the house under the ruse that he had a wife and that his wife was going to come. But, he sits them down and they're asking questions to him, but he's been turning it right back onto them. Like, oh, well, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? What do you think of this? And like, he clearly, as you said, knows a lot more than he's letting on. And then we get it just folding into this kind of sick game type of research thing that he's trying to do. And we don't really know how long it's been going on, but clearly he's been doing this for quite a long time.
Yeah, you get as the movie continues to go on, they do a good job of kind of peeling back the layers and exposing you to more of what his true intentions are for having them in his house, and you kind of see what he's trying to do, what game he's trying to play with these two sisters from the church. And it's done in a way that the one small knock I'll have on the film is, in my opinion, you don't entirely know what his intent is to do with this information that he's gathering and what what case he's trying to build to share with the world necessarily. Like, he has his worldview and what he feels about religion and how he feels about, faith versus, human will and those kinds of things that they do a fine job of exploring in the movie. But what his actual end goal is for this, other than, I'm just trying to prove a point, is where I think it falls just a tad bit flat. But outside of that, the execution of the film is really well done. It's dark, it's gritty, it's, really, really creepy. The creep factor's pulled way the hell up in this film that, it's dark. It's got all of these, heavy religious undertones to it that are a lot more in your face than they normally are in these types of movies, where it's very direct in, he's big to call out in the hypocrisy that he feels like are in religions. And is religion really an answer to why we exist and why these deep philosophical questions, or is it just a vehicle for men to control each other, for people to have control over each other? At the end, we don't know, right? That's what faith is supposed to be about, right? And he does a good job of kind of throwing that back at them to kind of like, well, do these things happen because God wills it to be so, or are they just circumstances of your actions and your choices, kind of thing? And it's a fun ride that they take you on, for sure. That, I didn't know how I was going to feel about the movie when I went and saw it, and I wound up really enjoying the performances for the most part in this film. That, Hugh Grant was brilliant. The other two girls were really, really well done, because you have in the two sisters, you have the lifelong church member in Sister Paxton, who's she plays that, I hate to say stereotypically, but she plays your common, like, raised in the church, always believe this, and my faith is unwavering. Whereas, Sophie Thatcher plays Sister Barnes, who was converted into the church, and she's not a lifelong believer, but she's had experience with other religions, and she winds up joining this church because her family did, and she was a convert that way, and has a little bit more of a willingness to question things and question her faith and question her beliefs. And you see that inner turmoil that she's having throughout, like, the course of the events in this film, and it's played out in a way that I think is very realistic and very smart.
Yeah, all the actors, it's got a pretty small cast overall. Yeah. You've got a few additional people that show up throughout the film. Don't want to spoil too much with some of the other surprises and things that it has within it. But, like, I didn't recognize Topher Grace at first. Like, he has a very minimal role in this film. But when he first showed up, I'm like, that looks familiar, but I don't know who that is. And it wasn't until later when he was actually speaking more and you got to see him, like, oh, geez, that's Topher Grace. Like, He did a decent job, but he had a very minimal role. I don't think that's really spoiling too much of anything. He's a part of it, but very minimal. But it's mainly carried by these three actors, and I think they did a great job. And I do agree with you for the most part that, it does a good job of exploring his depth and what he's going through and wanting to try to prove, but it doesn't really explain to you what his in-game payoff was going to be. Was he going to expose religion to the world, or was this a personal thing? Was he using it as a vehicle, like, well, I want to do these kind of horrible things and I'm going to put it behind this guise of trying to figure out religion? And it leaves a lot of stuff open in the end for you to try to think about more. It has you thinking about religion. It has you thinking about choices and control. And it even kind of has a mysterious ending to this film. But yeah, I do think they did a fantastic job. The cinematography looked great. But I think the biggest thing that helped this film past the performances was the use of sound and lighting. Like it painted a picture with the use of sound and music and the way everything looked and how they went about it and how they framed the characters and framed everything. It kept me into tension and suspense all the way throughout. Like, I was sitting there waiting, like, okay, what's happening next? What's going on? Like, I was hooked. I was in it. I'm just sitting here like, okay, all right, yeah, or what's happening next? Whoa, what's happening? Like, there were some decent surprises. It's a very simplistic kind of idea overall, but it's executed excellently. Like, it really dives deep into religion. So if that's something that's kind of a turn off to you, to either from one side of you just don't care about religion, or if you're a very religious person, it could turn you off of it just because of the angles it takes with religion. But I really enjoyed what they did with this film. Like I said, it really surprised me how much I ended up enjoying this in the end. Like, I think Beck and Woods did a fantastic job of presenting something. We've had religion done in horror films quite a lot, but it's normally a nun and church and exorcism and Satan and all that, and this kind of gives it a little bit different take on using religion in a horror film, and I think they did an excellent job with it. And I'll say Hugh Grant probably will be up for some award nominations, depending if that goes as far as an Oscar or some smaller awards, but I think he did a fantastic job of keeping his normal charm that we're used to, but he lures you in as an audience as well. And then you really start getting in when he's trying to break down the girls to, like, well, here's belief and here's disbelief, and this is what this means and that's what that means. Okay, make your choice. And he's just sitting whittling or playing music and singing or just drinking water kind of creepily. Like, he commanded the screen when he was on there.
Yeah, for sure. And this is a very good case of all the aspects of filmmaking kind of coming together in a way that makes it work, like you mentioned, because they do a great job. Like you said, the lighting adds tension, it adds suspense to it as well. Like I said, when I say dark, I mean dark visually, even like as much dark subject matter wise, where it's you're in a dark corridor and it feels like you're in a dark corridor. You can't see that well if it's not lit up. Like, you get that aesthetic in the way that it kind of sucks you into that world and keeps your attention. Like you said, we were watching that movie and didn't really break our gaze on the film very much, which is kind of a testament to how well this film was shot, in a way that it's like, it keeps you like, you can't really look away from it, which is good because, we're so distracted so easily anymore nowadays that we're like just kind of just hardwired to look around and look at things. But like, I think for the most part, we were pretty actively gazing like at the movie, locked in, paying attention to what was happening because it held our attention for a while, which is, I think, important when it comes to a good film. Like, does it grab you like that? And I think for both of us, it did. Hugh Grant is fantastic in this film. He's really embraced the villain part of his career at this point, where like, Hugh Grant's usually the lovable, goofy, quirky, kind of, charming lead man that's more or less portrayed as a good guy, where here recently in a couple roles that he's taken recently has been not so much. In this one, he's full villain, like intense in this one, and he does such a good job of doing it that I think it works for him in a way that I wasn't really expecting it to work as effectively as it did. But I was just like, man, this guy is like, he's creepy, but he's smart, and he's like, put a lot of thought into his actions and things like that. He has this gravitas about him that he because he's so smart, he's incapable of making an error in judgment at this point because he's done so much studying, which, spoiler alert, you find out it's not necessarily the case, right, in this movie. But yeah, he was so good in it that I think it's one of the, like, I would agree that I'd say it's one of the better performances he's had.
It's kind of crazy. The last thing I saw him in that I can remember that I saw him in was as an Oompa Loompa in Wonka. Right. And then you go from that to Heretic. I'm like, okay, that's a quite a bit different performance. But yeah, I mean, he kind of does to the audience what he does to the girls in the film. He lures you in. He gets you to feel sympathetic to him or to like him and to think that he's a nice guy. And then he sings the hooks into the audience and to the girls and stuff. And as you're going forward, you're just wondering what's going to happen next. And there's a lot of mystery and kind of puzzles and other things that go on after that. And again, I don't want to spoil it because but there is a lot of discussion to have over the ending. Like in the last 5 minutes of the film, there's a few different things that happen that will have a lot of people, and I think that's the point, is to have a lot of people talking about this, not only about all the religious stuff that it has in there, but was some of the stuff that he thought was true actually true? Because we get this, scene where we're seeing one of the girls from a different angle and sort of a contraption that, wait, are we seeing that right? Because that shouldn't be happening. And then there's something that she mentions earlier in the film that we see at the end of the film, but then we're like, wait, what's going on here? Like, are we seeing this or are we seeing that? Like, what does that mean? It leaves open a lot of discussion at the end of the film, but in a good way. Like, it wants you to discuss this. It wants you to think about it. It wants you to kind of go back and revisit it and see exactly what it is telling you. So in the end, Heretic was a really solid horror film. Like, it surprised me. Hugh Grant gave a fantastic performance. Both the women in this film did great as well. It'll have you thinking about religion, about mystery, about kind of everything. It'll make you think of some other films that have come out that are not exactly in the horror genre, but it kind of touches on some of the things it does. So in the end, I would probably give Heretic like a solid 8.5. Like, I think it was one of the better films of the year, one of the best horror films I've seen in a while, because it is kind of the thinking man's horror film. It really wants you to think and dive in, and it brings you into the film with the girls. You're kind of going through this with them, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm in the similar ballpark as you. I would give it an 8 out of 10 myself. The only thing that kind of knocks it down a little bit for me is I think they could have done a better job, like I said, of explaining what Hugh Grant's real final motivation was, what he was planning to expose here, if it's just a personal mission that he's on, or what's the point in him luring these two girls in to begin with? Is this part of a grander scheme that he's working on to kind of, he touches on it a little bit, but I think they could have done a better job of explaining it, which is probably much the only thing that kind of knocks it back for me. I would agree. It is one of the better horror films that I've seen in a while, because it's not your traditional run hack slash type horror film that you would think. It's more of a psychological thriller horror type film that I think does its job very well, in a better way than I think we've seen in a minute from this genre. Because horror films for the most part, are either really hit or really miss when it comes to their execution of the type of story that they're telling. We've seen that if you go back in archives and some of the horror films we've reviewed this year, it's a bit of a mixed bag and an up and down one, but this is kind of on a higher swing and done really well and really effective. That it's one of my favorite. I mentioned it, like one of my favorite horror movies I've seen in a while, that I can anticipate being in my kind of annual Halloween rotation of films moving forward. That it's one that I really want to go back and dive more into and kind of give another look at and see that, you know, did I catch everything that I thought I caught in this film, or maybe did I miss something that we haven't touched on here? But you know, this is one that's got a high level of rewatchability for me that not every film in the genre has. So this is one I anticipate coming back to for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. This is one I want to watch again so I could go deeper into the layers that it peels back and all the different things it's trying to say and tell and uncover. Like, because there's a lot of mystery and a lot of layers to it. But, you know, Heretic was a really good film in the end. It's in theaters right now. We highly recommend going and checking it out. I don't think many are going to be disappointed in what they see here. If you like the horror psychological thriller, I think there's a lot to find good out of here. And like I said, as we both said, Hugh Grant's performance was one of his best of his career. Like, he just commanded every scene he was in. It's not a big cast, but you know, he led everything so well, and he was so creepy, and it was just a fantastic performance.
Yeah, agreed. And it's such a good watch. We cannot recommend that one enough. If you're into the horror genre, even if you're not, if you're into faith-based stories that are, you know, a little bit more willing to have those type of conversations about, I think this is one you can definitely take something away from, and it's one that I think will have a lot of people buzzing about it for a while for sure. We're excited to. I was glad we checked that one out for sure to review, because I wound up liking it a lot more than I thought I would, which is what I want from a theater going experience. When you take a risk on a movie like that, you never know if it's gonna bomb heavily, but it did really well, and I'm excited to go check it out again for sure.
Yeah, because we didn't go in with like negativity that we didn't think it was going to be a good film, but I mean the trailers are pretty minimal. Yeah. It didn't show you a whole lot. It showed that it could be creepy and a little psychological, and that it could do all this stuff, but it thankfully left all the good meaty parts out of the trailer so you could experience in the film. So great job on the marketing for it. I hope it does well in theaters for them, because it is a film worth seeing, and hope it makes enough that they can continue telling these stories, because they've done some interesting horror and other tales, and I hope they're able to continue it after this, because Heretic was so good.
Yeah, for sure. It's another great film from A24 Studios. They're kind of owning that horror genre right now, and kind of being the industry leaders at the moment as far as like overall quality of those types of films. And it's another good one that they have on their hands. If you get a chance to check out the movie, send us your thoughts and leave a comment on this video, or come to our social media pages and tell us what you thought of it. We'd love to hear from you. Now, I want to move on to our TV review of the week. We have Tomb Raider: The Legend of Lara Croft. This is season 1. It is on Netflix now. It is 8 episodes long, and kind of jumping into this is more of a earlier tale of Lara Croft. So you know Lara Croft from the Tomb Raider series, the video games. She's this treasure hunting explorer, comes from a rich background, but has a real knack for history and treasure and things like that. And this series is kind of a jumping point into her adventures, on a much broader scale, where this is her kind of jumping off into that world, but still dealing with some really deep rooted trauma that she's trying to work through in this season. And that's kind of the crux of where this season goes. And overall, I enjoyed it, but I'm excited to kind of talk a little bit more about all the inner workings of this show, because they had a lot going on in 8 episodes.
Yeah, there's a lot more that happened in 8 episodes, and I thought was going to happen, which was good for it, but also bad. Like, I don't think it gave enough time for some stuff to fully develop. It definitely felt like a video game brought to life. Like, it felt there was a lot of scenes and situations and other things that felt very much ripped out of the video games, which isn't a bad thing. And it also dove into the deeper supernatural aspect of Lara Croft, because, with the last reboot that in the game series and the movie, that it was trying to keep them more grounded. Like, it still had a little bit of supernatural and everything, whether it was trying to do a grounded. And this is going back to the video game series and bringing an anime style to it, as similar as what they did with Terminator Zero. I think Terminator Zero style worked a little bit better than Tomb Raider, just because there was some CG that was mixed into some of this stuff. There's like logs or the train and other things, but it was kind of hit or miss when they used it, and it stuck out. Like, it didn't look terrible, but it stuck out that they were using CG to do some of the stuff. And there's other times where the animation was slightly rough, that a cut between the character looking one way and looking the other wasn't as smooth as it could have been. But overall, it did look pretty solid. I think they told a decent story, but it did feel a little rushed through these 8 episodes. Like, it was a fun ride, but a rushed ride.
Yeah, so the premise of the show is, she's chasing after these supernatural artifacts, these stones, if you will, and obviously there's a big bad that kind of presents themselves that is also after their stones for varying purposes. It was a little bit of a kind of feel like we've already done this, not bringing anything new to a motivational standpoint, and then it's a race to gain control of these stones for what use you want to have with them. There's this dynamic between, are these stones capable of being used for good, or are they being used for evil? So there's kind of that similar plot we get in a lot of these types of stories, but I think what the real heart of this story is Laura's, abilities as, she's a great fighter, she's a great explorer, she's very smart, but at the same time, she's dealing with and processing these traumatic experiences that she's had with loss and grief, and her ability to kind of channel that and, work through that while also doing the things she's trying to do to save, the world and humanity in this point. But they do a good job of her kind of struggling with that emotionally and trying to, come to grips with, am I really to blame for these awful things that have happened to me, and how do I deal with that, and how does that affect my relationship with other people? Because you have, in my opinion, one of my favorite adds to this show was Jonah, and if you know anything about the video games, Jonah is kind of Laura's right hand in the more recent, games and adaptations that you've seen. So bringing him into this animated series as well was a big hit for me. I really enjoyed, the arc that Jonah had in this story, as well as, the interpersonal relationship between him and Laura, who has this very brotherly, sisterly kind of bond that, they very much have that type of relationship in this show. And it's kind of the heart and crux of, Laura's emotional journey that she goes through in this season.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of this season was about Laura trying to come to grips with things. So, we start off with action and adventure in the beginning that her and one of her companions have found a box that they're not exactly sure what it is at first, but, as the series goes on, we learn that this is the first of 4 peril stones. But, another guy, Charles Devereaux, which we go into trying to find out a little bit more. He was kind of thin. It was a basic kind of revenge story for him. Like, well, this group took out my family, I'm going to take out them, but I'm willing to risk the entire world to take out this group that hurt me when I was a kid. But yeah, a lot of it revolves around, the search for these 4 peril stones, which, were created by these goddesses who, to bring balance to the world, to put chaos and greed and everything that imbalanced the world into separate stones and spread them around. Well, Charles wants to bring them all back together to get this kind of ultimate power, which allows him some different supernatural things. He can control people by touching them. It can affect people in different ways. Some it brings out their rage even more. Some are able to control it because of balance. But it does dive deep into Laura as she loses people along the way, and she struggles with, should I bring anybody else into this? I'm just going to be a loner, stay away from everybody. I don't need help. I don't want help, but her friends just won't stop helping her. Like, we're going to be there for you whether you want us or not, even if it puts us in danger. And that was a good balance in between it, is having her dealing with, well, here's my treasure hunting adventures, but here's the emotional impact. Like, I can't stay in the Croft Manor because I have too many memories about my dad and Roth and everything, but it's my home and all this, but I want to go and stop Charles and do all this stuff, but I don't want to get anybody involved, but I can't do it myself. Like, there's a huge struggle for her internally and externally, but I do wish there was a few more episodes to let that breathe a little bit more. It's 8 30-minute episodes, so it crams a lot into that, and I think it could have used a little more time to breathe. But I do say Haley Atwell was fantastic as the voice of Lara Croft. That kind of all the voice actors did a great job. I think this story just needed a little more time to breathe.
Agreed. And that's the advantage and disadvantage of the time frame that you're given, right? So 8 30-minute episodes is a very easy bingeable watch. You can watch it very quickly. They range an average of 30 minutes, so you can watch the entire season in 4 hours. Like, you can get it done fairly quickly. You can take an afternoon and watch it. That's what I did. I watched it all in a day and was able to, kind of take it all in stride back to back and, watch the story as needed to kind of, get the entire crux of it in one shot. And they do a fine job of walking that line. There are some things that are messy visually with the show, with the animation style. It's not the smoothest. It looks really beautiful in some spots, but it is a little messy in others. And if you're looking in a Tomb Raider series for them to kind of jet set around the world and see multiple locations, you get that in spades in the show. One of the things it does well is kind of doesn't stay stagnant in one place for too long. In each of these episodes, they go to a different place. So you're getting a lot of the exploration. You're getting a lot of, seeing the world and different events happening all over the place to kind of bring this whole story together, which I think they did really effectively. And that's kind of what you want if you're a fan of Tomb Raider. You want that jet-setting adventure type thing that you could, in a video game setting, even get, where you're kind of jumping from place to place, and you get a lot of that in this show.
And I do feel it felt very much like a video game, like we were watching a video game brought to life, because there was a lot of situations and a lot of different things that just really felt like, all right, this is a video game cutscene, or this is, this is awarded to you to upgrade your, grappling hook, or getting your weapons and getting this and that. It very much felt like a video game, including, which is good and bad to me. So in episode 7, this is slightly spoilerish. I'm not going deep into it, but a lot of our main conflict is wrapped up in episode 7, but we still had a full episode in episode 8, which episode 8 wasn't bad, but it did feel like a video game in a way. Like, once you defeat the main boss, you still have a little bit of exploration you can do just to have like a little fun. And that's kind of what it was. It was a little slight exploration at the end to kind of wrap it all up, and I think it wrapped it up decently. It also sets up for another season, which has been greenlit and is moving forward, but it felt just, episode 8 kind of felt tacked on. Like, it could have been part of episode 7, and they could have done it in a shorter amount of time. It was an interesting episode, but at the end, it just didn't feel like, did we need an entire episode after our main conflict resolution for this?
Yeah, it kind of felt a little, it took me a little bit out of it, because I remember watching the end of episode 7. I'm like, wait, there's another episode, and we've kind of got a resolution on this. How are we moving forward with it? But yeah, it was a lot more set up to what's to come. It felt very Agatha all along, if I want to go back to our last episode, where you get a lot of the resolution in the penultimate episode, but not the actual final episode of the season. And it does a fine job of setting up the dynamic of the team moving forward into season 2. I'm glad it's getting a chance to have a continuation of the story, that hopefully they take what they learned from season 1 and apply it to season 2 and kind of take the story to the next level, I think, because now you can really dive into having some adventures now that, a lot of that emotional trauma, she's worked her way through. She's a lot more open to, having these people that she cares about and willing to accept their help and, form this team and, put your trust in them and move out to, take on whatever next adventure awaits for her out there. That there's some fun stuff that they could do to move forward into season 2 that I think they have the chance to really jump off and explore when they get that season made.
Yeah, they had to be pretty confident that they were getting a season 2 when they made this, because the last half of episode 8 was setting up for another season. So if they didn't end up getting another one, then that's an awkward ending to the show, because it sets up like she's setting out another adventure. She's got another mystery to solve and everything else. And you've got to be confident that you're moving on. Because you can leave things open-ended to where if it doesn't move on, that's okay. If it does move on, you have stories to go. But this was like fully, hey, we're not over. We're getting another season. We're going on. And it's a good thing they got that, because, I know this launched, last month, and it was just announced this month, just a couple weeks ago, that they were getting a second season. So unless Netflix told them right away they were going to do more than one season, it was a little ballsy just to move straight in to say, like, hey, we're setting up a second season whether we have a green lit or not.
I like the confidence, though. You like the confidence that they have in their ability to tell the story they want to tell and know that they're going to get the opportunity to go further along with it. We'll see how long it does last. The animated series on Netflix tend to last a little bit longer than the live action ones, I've noticed, because if you look at all the series that are animated on Netflix, several of them are around for 4 and 5 seasons. That they get a little bit of a longer leash than the live action ones, which could go into how much it costs to make the show versus, a live action one that involves a lot more people, a lot more production, a lot more setup. Not that animated features don't have that, but it feels like they get a little bit of a longer leash. So the opportunity could be there for several seasons of the show, depending on how well it does. But at the end of the day, I think that, Tomb Raider Legend of Lara Croft is a fun adventure. If you're fans of the show or not, I think you can get some enjoyment out of the series. It is by no means a perfect show, but it's definitely not a bad show either. I would put it a little bit above average in the sense that it's a good story. It's told well. There's some good emotional, a good emotional story arc that they tell, setting up for a much bigger adventure. And for that reason, I'd probably give it a 6.5. If I were to say as far as an overall rating, because there's stuff that definitely could be cleaned up and leaves a little bit to be desired, but I think there's room for them to kind of take things to the next level in season 2, and I'm hoping for bigger and better things out of it.
Yeah, I agree. It gives a lot to, if you're a video game fan of Tomb Raider, especially the originals. There's a lot of throwbacks with creatures and the supernatural and everything else that she deals with. But yeah, it does have some animation problems, as I mentioned, with some CGI that's mixed into the hand-drawn animation that kind of takes you out of it. The pacing of cramming all this into 8 episodes, and especially with a lot wrapping up in 7 and still having the 8th episode to go. I hope in season 2 they're able to tighten it up and give us a solid story that works in that 8 episodes, because it felt like this could have gone on for 10, 13, 15 episodes. It was a very quickly paced series, but in the end it was a good voice acting. It was an entertaining story overall. I would probably give it a 7. I would go a little bit above. I enjoyed it. I had fun with it. It had issues, but I think it's something that's worth watching.
All 8 episodes of Tomb Raider: The Legend of Lara Croft are available on Netflix right now. Like I said, it's a quick watch. Takes about 4 hours. If you've watched it, leave us a comment on our YouTube video. Let us know what you thought. Are you looking forward to season 2 like we are? Check it out and let us know.
Yeah, coming up next week, we have kind of our first big holiday film of the year with Dwayne Johnson, Chris Evans, J.K. Simmons as Red One. So J.K. plays a rip Santa Claus who goes missing, and Dwayne, being one of the head elves, has to get Chris Evans's, he's a robber, a thief type of character, to help him out. And it looks fun. It looks like it could be kind of corny and everything else, but it looks like it could be a lot of fun. I'm just curious where it falls in between being family fun or if it's more adult fun. It looks like it would be more for the teenager and on, and maybe not as much as the little kids, at least from what the trailer's shown. But I'm looking forward to checking it out.
Yeah, that's one that we got excited for when we saw the trailer. We're like, this is going to go one of two ways. It's either going to be really hilarious and really fun, we're going to have a really good time, or it's going to be really bad and we're going to have the opportunity to come back and roast the movie. I'm hoping it's not the roasting part of it. I hope it's actually a fun movie that we're going to have a lot of things to take away from it.
And you have Dwayne Johnson having a slap fight with Krampus, so
so
hopefully there's more fun in it like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, on demand this week, we have the Francis Ford Coppola, kind of controversial film. It didn't do very well in theaters, Megalopolis, and Magpie starring Daisy Ridley. This is one I didn't hear a whole lot about. It was kind of one that I've really only heard because it's coming out on demand this week. Both of them will be out on November 12th, so I am going to check out Megalopolis to see exactly how it is. It seemed interesting, but just with the controversy and everything about it, I didn't have a whole lot of want to go see it in theaters, especially with the choices we had to go outside of it. Like it launched with some other films that just looked more entertaining to us than that was.
Yeah, that's definitely one that's not without its controversies. It did not do that well at the box office, like you said. I'll give it a shot just because of, all of the amazing films that Francis Ford Coppola has made throughout his career, but it feels like the last couple films he's put out have been a little bit of a lesser quality than what we're used to from him. We'll see how this one does. I love Adam Driver, so I'm willing to give it a chance, and just for that reason alone, just to see if it's worth the watch, but I'll definitely be checking that one out.
Over on the TV side, so we have yet another holiday show starting. Harry Potter Wizards of Baking will be on the Food Network on November 14th. We will have some of the cast members will be a part of that, so it's going to be interesting. Of course, during the holidays, Halloween, and, through the Christmas time, we have a lot of holiday baking, and we have a lot of holiday themed shows, which I always have fun watching with my kids. And this one, being Harry Potter themed, should be pretty fun to check out.
Yeah, for sure. It's hosted by the actors who played the Weasley twins, so that's the integration for Harry Potter there. Like, I'm excited to check this one out. I know, growing up, I love the Harry Potter movies as well. Like, it was a real bonding experience for my family to go see. It was one of those last types of movies that as a family we went and saw together before we kind of all like went off and did our own things as adults. But that was one that really kept us together and one that we enjoy, and I'm excited to check that out because it's got the potential to be a lot of fun with the integration of former cast members into the show for that. That's a fun one.
Yeah, we also have Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 2 on Netflix that's coming out, so you can look back in our archives to see what we thought about Part 1. We're really looking forward to see where it goes with Part 2. This looks to be probably all tournament, that we're all about this big tournament. We have some new cast members joining for different dojos and stuff. It looks like it should be really entertaining. We only have one more part left after this that's going to be out next year to wrap the show up.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. The trailer looks amazing. I've loved this show from the beginning. I'm excited to see the next part of it, to see where the story goes, and definitely one that I look forward to talking about here for sure.
And we've talked a lot about Apple TV Plus shows that you just don't feel like they're doing the advertising that these shows really deserve, because we have another season of Silo coming out, which is a very highly rated and raved about show, but not many people know about it. That's going to be out on Apple TV Plus. Both Cobra Kai and Silo will be out on November 15th, but also November 15th. It was supposed to happen earlier this year, but there was an injury that stopped it, and some weirdness now. That documentary that came out, Jake Paul was wearing a fat suit, trying to hide. It felt like it was turning into a reality TV show that's not so real anymore. But we finally do have coming up, Mike Tyson and Jake Paul will be boxing. This is another one, like, if it was a legit fight, which I don't think, like the Floyd Mayweather fight with Conor McGregor was, that wasn't a real fight. They were just there to collect a paycheck. They weren't really trying. Mike Tyson, no matter how old he gets, is not someone I would stand in the ring with. So if he was legitimately fighting Jake Paul, I think he knocks him out pretty quickly, even in his 60s. We'll see what kind of dramatics happen, because I don't think this is going to be kind of a legit fight, but I do want to check it out and see, because if you've seen any of the training stuff, most of Jake's has been crazy, over the top, humorous, weird stuff, while Mike Tyson's like showing how fast he still is and hitting hard and everything else. We'll see exactly how that fight looks, but that'll be live on Netflix on November 15th as well.
Yeah, that's definitely one. You couldn't pay me enough money to take a punch from Mike Tyson. That's for sure. Even at the age that he is now, he's still a very bad man that you don't want to mess up with him. But it's going to be interesting to see this one from a Netflix perspective, because they're starting to dive more into the live aspect of their programming. They've had live comedy specials, they've had live roasts, they've had some of the things that they've done in that live. This is the first really sports centric live thing that they've done that's gotten a lot of eyeballs. Obviously, we've talked about them getting WWE Monday Night Raw beginning of the year next year. That's going to be a regular thing for them. So this is a good opportunity for them to get the kinks out of the way now before that becomes a regular thing. But this is going to be, despite all the comedic things around it and like a lot of the goofiness that surrounds this, it's going to be very highly watched and very highly talked about. That it's going to be kind of appointment viewing for a lot of people on the 15th when this actually takes place.
Yeah, even though I'm not a huge fan of the Pauls,
sure,
I'm looking forward to seeing it, just to see, like, I want to see if it's a real fight or not,
sure,
and see just how hard Tyson can still punch at that age. Because like he said, I don't care if he was like 90 years old in a wheelchair and could barely move. I'm not taking a punch from the man. Like, I don't care. I'm not standing behind his fist. So yeah, we'll see exactly how that fight turns out, and hopefully Netflix has a smooth live experience for that, because I think a lot of this stuff is gearing them up for live WWE and more live events going forward, because that's what a lot of streaming platforms are starting to get into more, is looking for the live sports, the live events, the live stuff can bring in a lot of revenue and a lot of eyes and a lot of new subscriptions to their services. So pretty much all of them are going heavily into the live programming.
Yeah, we'll see how this does. It's going to be an absolute circus, but we'll see what comes out of it.
And lastly, on November 17th, we have Dune Prophecy. So this is a prequel series to the 2 Dune films that we have so far. So it is in that same universe. We're getting to go back in the past and see it looks solid. It's not done by the same, director, but it looks like they're trying to mimic and make sure it feels like it's part of that world. I'm looking forward to see what they do with it. Like, Dune is such a huge, expansive story through the books and everything. And we do have, part 3 of the films is in the works to be out in a few years. But, until then, we have this series to kind of give us a little bit more in the Dune universe. And, hopefully it's really solid to be out on HBO and Max, which I still don't get that assertion that they try to do. Is like, oh, this isn't a Max series, it's an HBO series. Where's it airing? On Max.
Yeah, it's one of the issues that they have keeping, they want to keep things separate but together at the same time. It's a really weird presentation for it. Obviously, if you have HBO, you're going to be able to watch it on HBO, but you're also going to be able to watch it on the streaming service. So I guess they want to point you in the direction of HBO, but if you already have Max, you're having it available to watch there as well. So the integration for both is going to be there. If you don't have Max, you can at least still watch it if you have HBO. So the option is going to be there. I'm excited to check that one out too, because that's, as much as we talk about, our love of the Dune films, especially the one that came out this year, like, we're excited to check that show out and talk about it eventually. That's one that we're definitely excited to check out for sure. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. We can't thank you enough for your continued support. Please remember to go to willbringthepopcorn.com for all of our episodes. You can go check out our archives, check out any episode you may have missed. Don't forget to give us a like and a subscription on YouTube. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. You can also give us a 5-star review anywhere you listen to the show on your audio podcasting platforms. That also helps elevate the profile of the show. Can't thank you enough for that support. Coming up next week, we will be reviewing the Dwayne Johnson, Chris Evans film Red One, along with season 6, part 2 of Cobra Kai. Excited to check that one out and talk about it as well. But until next time, I'm Josh, he's Brad, and we'll see you next week.